Let's see. So right now, I'd love to get the presenters that we have on the call to introduce themselves. So I'm going to ask Adrian to go.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Adrian Gage. I am the Assistant Dean for Student Affairs and the Director for Residence Life and Housing.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Giard, and I am the Assistant Director for Residence Life and Housing, and I deal primarily with housing operations.
Good afternoon. My name is Josh Katz. I'm the Associate Director of Community Standards, and I work with the orientation program.
Josh is our question moderator for the day. Although if we don't need to use the chat, Josh can kind of help out too with asking the questions that some of you asked when you actually registered. So I'm going to do that in just a moment, okay? So think about, if you do have any questions, you can either, like I said, put them in the chat or just remember them and we'll ask you momentarily. If your questions are more on the personal side and you don't really want to talk freely open on this call, you can definitely, and I'm going to put up in a second, information of how to contact Residence Life with personalized questions. So we can do that as well, okay? At the end of this call, I'm going to do a quick overview about what we're looking at for first year orientation for your student. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Now, I know Alicia probably could say it by heart. She's heard me say this. I'll go over that at the end as well. So let's see. Josh, would you like to maybe do the first question?
Sure, absolutely. We did have 3 questions that were submitted prior to. So the first question is, when do students find out housing, and if housing will be an option for the fall semester?
Yeah, so I'll answer the second question first. We are hoping that housing on campus is a thing for the fall. A decision will hopefully be made about that in the middle to end of June, and then we'll get that information out to all the students who are interested in living on campus. And then if we are able to house for the fall semester, we will have housing assignments out hopefully around July 15th. That's our goal at this point.
All right, thank you. The second question was, if a student has difficulty transitioning to residence life, what support do you have in place?
Yeah, so there's a number of different things that we have in place on campus. We have resident assistants who are student leaders that live in the residence halls with your students. We have 13 that live in Dowden Hall, and we have 12 that live in Sheehan Hall, which is the 2 first year buildings. So they're like kind of the first line of defense, if you will. They're there to like help your student get acclimated, be a support for them, and more importantly, get them to other resources on campus. So our RAs are really good at connecting them with our professional staff members that we call residence directors that live in the residence halls. So sometimes the residence directors step in and they have a conversation with the student and kind of see what we can do. Sometimes we refer out to our counseling center or student accessibility services if there's like a disconnect there and things like that. So we do have support on campus. Sometimes the students need to tell us they need help sometimes. Sometimes it's not always like the RAs can just pick up on it if the student is projecting that everything's normal. So we definitely encourage your students to really advocate for themselves. And if they are struggling, let someone know. People do struggle. A lot of our RAs struggled at some points, at different points, whether it was their first year or their second year coming back, sophomore year, sometimes also a really hard transition. So it's a very normal thing for students to go to, and we're just here to support your student in whatever way that we can.
So Becca, Becca and Adrian, the third question, I know you answered part of it about when will they'll receive their information, but the first part of the question is, how are students placed in the residence halls?
Yeah, so incoming students can do one of 2 things. They can either roommate match with someone that they know is going to Worcester State, whether it's a friend from home, a family friend, or someone that they met at like open house or something like that that's in their major that they connected with. So they can do that through their My Housing account. Or if they just want to go random when they sign their license agreement, there's a questionnaire. It's probably about a dozen different questions to ask them, are they morning people or night people? Do they study in silence or music? Different things like that. And then our housing software uses the answers to those questions to match up people who don't roommate match. I would say we're about 40% of our incoming students do roommate match and 60% don't. And our housing software matches them as best as it can. Most of the time it does work out. Sometimes it doesn't. But most of the times when it doesn't work out, it's because someone either wasn't truthful on their questionnaire, or they had someone else answer it for them that doesn't maybe know things that they do or don't do as well as they thought they did. So those are the different ways that students get housed. And then we also ask students to put their first choice for residence hall, whether it's Dowden or Sheehan Hall. We try our hardest to give students what they want, but we only have such a limited number of spaces in Sheehan Hall that we can't always give it to every first year student.
Becca, there's actually a question in the chat, which kind of a to the point you just made. Can you talk a little bit more about the differences between the two first year halls? So Sheehan and Dowden, and how do you decide who gets placed where? And then do students usually get their first choice?
Yeah, so there's a multitude of different things that go into where students live. We have like our students who are nursing, CSD, or occupational therapy that want to live within their major, all will live in Dowden Hall. So they will automatically, if they want to live within that major, they will automatically be placed in Dowden Hall. So that does take a good chunk of people out who might have wanted Sheehan in a sense. And then we kind of just do our best to give students what they want. It's not always a doable thing, but we really do try our hardest to give them what they want. And a lot of our students, not a lot, but students who don't get Sheehan as their first choice, they end up loving Dowden. Like it's an experience that they didn't think that they wanted, but they really do benefit from that experience. So there's not, honestly, after a couple weeks, they might, once they move in after a couple weeks, they're really in their routine and they're really happy to be in Dowden Hall. So we don't have too many issues there. We do our best, but like I said, there's no guarantee.
Are there any singles available for freshmen?
We do have a very limited number of singles. Most of the singles that we have in the first year areas are for students who have applied for housing accommodations and been approved for them. So that's medical issues, mental health issues, different things like that.
How many students do you expect to be living on campus?
Adrian, do you want to take that one?
So right now, we don't know. It's a true answer. We have a couple of scenarios that are out there, and that's what Rebecca was referring to, is that the leadership of the university will be making that decision sometime probably between the middle and end of June about what that actually looks like. So there is the possibility of, some of the different possibilities are that we open as normal, which would be, or I guess a modified version of normal, where we would not be upsizing rooms. Sometimes we upsize a double to a triple or a triple to a quad. We would not be doing that. Some of the current guidance that has come out recently says to keep your numbers of people to 2 or less in a room. And then so that's one of the options would be where no bedroom would have more than 2 people. And then one of the other options that we're also currently looking at is, what does the campus look like if we did 1 person per room across campus? So so right now we're kind of waiting, just like everybody else, to find out which one of those is what we're going to move forward with for the fall.
That is all the questions that we have in the chat at this time.
Anybody else have any other questions? One of the things I mentioned in the transitions Zoom Q&A that we did last week with counseling was to kind of reassure parents about how much preparation and how many meetings we're all in on a daily to provide a great experience for what's going to happen in the fall. And I mean, there's so many subcommittees upon subcommittees of what to do in so many scenarios. And so even though, nothing has really come out at this moment exactly of what we're going to do, I do have to reassure you that we are working hard to come up with a good plan. Residence Life, I mean, they've been working now for a long time to put different scenarios together. So I think that's important to kind of reassure families that that we're going to come out with a solid plan, and you can't even imagine the hours that we're all working toward this. They'll all probably, my colleagues would probably say the same. It is a lot, and it's so different from anything that obviously any of us have experienced. But we are working toward a good plan, I would say, especially in life.
Adrian and Becca, if one person per room is the way that this university goes, will we be billed for a single?
So that's also part of our conversation is we are looking at for the one thing we do know at this point is that Dowden, if everybody who's in Dowden will be charged one specific rate. We are looking at the possibility of to say if some students would typically be in double rooms, which is a lower cost, do we just charge everybody the double room rate, knowing some people would have specifically requested the lower rate for financial reasons. So we are looking at that. For the other 3 buildings on campus that have primarily upper class students, we are also looking at the possibility of charging one of the lower rates for all 3 of those buildings and just have it flat across the board. Because if we move to one person per room, we will not be able to house everybody who requests housing on campus. So we are looking at different things like that, but we are trying to make it as fair as possible if we are in that one person per room for folks across campus.
Some schools are planning to open earlier than usual. Is that part of the conversation at all for Worcester State?
We have had that conversation because there are schools in Worcester who are looking at the middle of August instead of the beginning of September. I know it was discussed. I don't know that it's one that they're moving forward with that at this point. But I know it was in the discussion. There was that. There was on the other end of that. There was also some discussions about, do we have classes up until Thanksgiving and then everybody goes home and you do online for the rest of the semester because there's only about a week of classes and then finals? Is it possible to flip it to that way and do online for that last part of the semester? So I think at this point, there's a lot of those kind of questions that they are discussing to see what works best for our particular school. But yes, that is something that has been discussed.
Is there a possibility of no residence halls opening at all if the semester starts? And if that occurs, what happens to students who cannot commute due to distance?
I would think if we're at a point where we won't be opening the residence halls at all, I think that the school is probably online only at that point, or very, very hybrid structured would be my guess, because we have people, students who are international students who come from out of state, who obviously wouldn't be able to commute as well. So I think if we're at that point in August, which it doesn't seem like we're going to be at that point right now, but if we are, I think that would push the school to be specifically probably online.
Okay. I know Beth and Scott wanted to ask a question verbally, so you guys can unmute yourself and ask if you want.
Earlier, when I muted myself, it wouldn't let me unmute, Josh.
Here we go. You got it. By the way, I'm going to be running a church session with people having to be muted and unmuted for their annual meeting soon. So I'm learning. What are the possible variations of what the dining services might have to do? Like your dining hall, how they're going to allow how many people, like are there discussions about what the best and worst scenarios that you might have to open up with are?
Sure. So some of that goes along with housing as well. We are currently looking at taking some rooms completely offline that would serve as, like, if someone got sick, like a quarantine space, they could be removed from their building and they would be housed there. Our dining services is planning to do food delivery if there are people who who are either waiting for test results or for things like that where they're supposed to be isolated or or quarantined until they find out. They would deliver to the door or to the outside of the door, kind of like set their food down, knock on the door, and then folks could come and get it.
But
So
you don't see any big changes happening for the dining hall itself.
Oh, there will
no,
be.
they are definitely having that conversation. They are talking about, there are loads of those conversations about de-densifying those numbers. The dining hall holds about 600 standard, so I don't see them feeding anywhere close to that number of people.
But they haven't given you any range of ideas as to what they could do, like extend hours or stagger. Like they haven't given you any real indication which direction they might be doing to try and think on those lines, what they can do to reduce density.
So we've talked, my understanding is they've talked about all of that, about expanding their hours, we've even talked some about, do students in the residence halls get like are you assigned a time? So to say if kind of like for move-in day, this is your time to come, does your apartment, or for like Dowden, does that wing all go to eat at the same time? For like lunch and dinner.
Which of course is a good and bad thing. You can't have, if it's not good for your schedule for any reason. So right. I hear why it's good for the density reduction, but
there's also some discussions about them having an app where you can select like a grab and go, where you would just kind of walk up and like the day before or something, you would pick from, these 10 items, here's what I want for dinner tomorrow. You just kind of go up, grab it, and then you could go and eat wherever you want. So they are looking at a lot of different options. I know that I think they had since it's an outside corporation, I think they had their big meeting toward the end of last week. And so we're expecting that this week or next week that we'll be able to have some of those more conversations, not only about what they're trying to do, what they're looking to do company-wide, but what does that look like as it's reflected specifically for Worcester State. But they are trying to figure out ways that allow students to have some of that selectivity that works best for their schedule. And for some students who may say, you know what, I really don't have a desire to go into the dining hall very often just because of the number of people. Do they offer that app that gives them that kind of grab and go flexibility where they could pick up food, but they could eat it, either outside on a picnic table or go back to their room or something else.
Dining service too will be on the student services group 1 Zoom Q&A. There's one next Monday at 4. And there's another one, I believe, the following week. So somebody from dining service will be there. So they may, at that point, have a few more answers too that we don't have tonight. So that might be something to consider. Or you can always email too, and we can connect you with them.
Becca, can you restate where to find the roommate info, the more detailed one?
Yeah, so it's part of their license agreement and questionnaire. So I think, let me just look. So your son, I think, is Lucas, if I did my looking right. And he has not matched with a specific person. So he hasn't he doesn't have a friend that he necessarily wants to live with. So we'll just take the answers to his questionnaire. So because they signed the license agreement, he did all those questions. I know it seems like it's not a lot of questions, but the more questions you add, the harder it is to actually match with people. Because then you get a lot of different answers. So it actually makes it harder. So although it does seem simple, those are the ones that we think are pretty much the most important when it comes to being able to live in a space together. Roommates don't have to be best friends by any means, but we do try and get them to be as compatible as possible to just live in the space and have respect for the space together. So that's why it does seem simple. Yeah.
Any other questions? Want to see anything, Josh?
Nope, it's nothing. Thank you, Alicia.
So let's get right to some presenter introductions. So I'd like Adrian, why don't you start?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Adrian Gage. I'm the Assistant Dean for Student Affairs and the Director for Residence Life and Housing.
Kristen?
Hi, everybody. My name is Kristen Nelson. I'm the Associate Director for Residence Life.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Giard. I'm the Assistant Director for Residence Life and Housing, and I deal with housing operations. So that's room assignments and different things like that.
Perfect. And our question moderator for the evening.
Hi, my name is Josh Katz. I'm the Associate Director of Community Standards, and I also work with the orientation program.
Okay, so like I mentioned, when a lot of the parents registered for our calls on the registration form, many questions, some specifically to Residence Life. So what we're going to do is have Josh go through those questions in a moment. If you do have more personalized questions, I'm going to put up in a moment Residence Life's contact information. If it's something really personal that maybe you don't want to ask on this call, I could direct you to that email, and you could send a personalized email to them for answers, just so you know. Once we're done going through all the questions, I will give a quick overview of what we're looking at for first year orientation this year and moving to an online program for your students, so I can go over details for that. So I'm going to turn it over to Josh to start with our pre-registered questions.
All right, so the first question is, when do students find out housing, and if housing will be an option this semester?
Yeah, so if housing is an option for the fall semester, we're hoping to know that information in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and we'll share that with you as soon as we have that. If we are allowed to house for the fall semester, we are looking to get housing assignments out right around the middle of July, July 14th, July 15th, and that will go to your student's Worcester State email address. It will have their hall, their room assignment, and who their roommate is. And if they did roommate matching, they'll automatically be placed with that student. If not, our housing software will match them with someone who seems to be compatible based on the answers to their roommate questionnaire.
Thanks, Becca. The next question is, if a student has difficulty transitioning to Residence Life, what support do you have in place?
I'll go again.
It
Doesn't matter. Do you want to go?
No, go ahead.
So if students are having trouble transitioning to on-campus living, we have resident assistants that live in the halls with our residents. They are there to get your student acclimated to living on campus, answer questions that they might have. They're there to be a resource to them. They put on programs, might look a little different for this fall, but they will be doing some sort of social programs and educational programs for their students as well. But they're really there to be a resource to direct students to other resources on campus if they're struggling to transition to living on campus, and talking to the RA or talking to the residence director of the building isn't really working. They will refer them to people outside other departments, like possibly OSIL, which is the Office of Student Involvement, to get involved on campus to make those connections. Or maybe they saw a counselor at home and they're kind of missing that connection there. They'll connect them to counseling services and different things like that. So the RAs are really there to help them get acclimated as much as they can, and just be there as a resource to them.
The last question is, can you guys talk about the different first year housing options that are available?
Yep, so our first year students live in 2 of our buildings. One of them is Dowden Hall. That's our traditional first year residence hall. Generally you live in a double room. We do have some triple sized rooms as well, but it has common bathrooms. So you're sharing a bathroom with the people in your wing, which is about 38 to 40 people. There's lounges on all the floors. There's study rooms. It's a really good community building. It's like your quintessential first year residence hall. What you think about, what you see in the movies, things like that. That's pretty much what Dowden is. Then the other option we have is Sheehan Hall. That houses about 120 to 150 first year and transfer students. And that is suite style living. So it's generally 2 double rooms in a suite, and those 4 students will share a bathroom, just the 4 of them. And there's common areas in that building. There's also a common kitchen on the 2nd floor of that building that students can utilize. There's study rooms. There's a laundry room. There's a laundry room in Dowden Hall as well.
Thank you. Those are all the pre-submitted questions. And as a reminder, if you have any questions for our panel, please ask them in the group chat. And we did have one get asked while you were talking. So the question is, with my other kids, they had a freshman Facebook page to start the process of getting to know each other. Do you know if that exists here?
Yeah, we do have that here. It is does anybody know the link? Because we could put it in the chat. I'll find the link. Okay. There is a link if you want to share it with your student. Otherwise, they can search. It would be the Class of 2024 Accepted Students Facebook page at Worcester State. So they'll probably be able to find it easier than we will, but we'll get that link up there.
Oh, that's 20.
We're too old to find it. Yeah. At least quickly.
Exactly.
It's usually done through admissions. I know that.
Yeah.
I don't see it on here. Those are all the questions that we have in the chat. If anyone has any more, feel free to add them now.
Or you can just unmute yourselves maybe in chat.
Good. We could do that.
There's only 3 of you.
It's only a few people. I know it's funny.
We do want to acknowledge that we know this is a tricky time for your family to be making a decision to send them to Worcester State. And we want you to know that we will be open this fall, whether or not housing will be what it normally looks like or school will be what it normally looks like. But Worcester State is planning on opening our campus this fall, and we will take all precautions to make sure your students safe and that we're doing our best by you, because we know it's hard to trust to send them away. So thanks for doing that.
One of the things I did mention, and I saw this question that came up, I think, but one of the things I did mention in the previous Zoom calls is how much the university is working toward plans for the fall. Every one of us on this call is on some sort of subcommittee dealing with COVID-19 related issues, whether it's facility use, if it's residence life, if it's whatever it might be. Every aspect is being looked at and worked on currently. So I think it's important, as Kristen said, that we're really working toward setting your students up for success. We, at this moment, don't know everything that's going to be happening. Hopefully very soon we will. But all of us are working. I think the university is doing a great job kind of just moving forward and planning. It's just an odd time for everybody. It really is.
We did have a couple more questions come in, Christy. Sure. What are some alternatives for COVID restricted housing?
We're looking at several different alternatives, anywhere from opening as we normally would, down to limiting or de-densifying the number of students. One conversation we've had even recently is, do we look at splitting up wings and assigning like half of the wing, like staging the hours that the community bathroom is available. So you just kind of alternate between different parts of the wing, so that just trying to lessen the number of people who would be using those community bathrooms at a certain time. There have been other discussions that are do you have some stairwells that are just for going up, some stairwells that are just for going down in the building. We've had some conversations about what are the numbers of people who are allowed in elevators, or do you specifically just have the elevators offline except for people who have mobility issues, where stairs may be much more of a hindrance for them. So there's pretty much all the conversations are going on, but we haven't made it to the point of narrowing them down to a specific answer. But we are looking at ways that we can, how do we lessen the contacts and kind of keep that safety boundary as much as possible between residents.
The other question came in about limiting exposure. Will move-in dates be staggered in order to limit exposure?
We're definitely looking at that, at increasing the number of move-in dates, and we've even had the conversation about, do we open the residence halls a couple of weeks early just for people to move their belongings in? And so people would be scheduled for a time as a potential where you would come, move all your belongings in, but the student wouldn't stay. At that point, they would come in, kind of set up their room, get everything ready, and then they would come back a couple of weeks later, and they would just have to kind of bring themselves and those last few remaining items, just to spread out as much as possible the the number of students or the number of families who are trying to, you know, move in and out of the building at the same time.
Thank you. If you haven't seen, I know Kristen did post in the chat the name of that Facebook group for the class of 2024. Right now, we don't have any more questions in the chat.
Okay. So I can move on to talk a little bit about what orientation will look like this year. But if anything comes up or you have any thoughts or questions, please feel free to add them still to the chat, and we can cover them after. So typically, regular year, we would actually be in the middle of orientation leader training right now, and we do our first year orientation in June. We are looking to move it, and it will be moved to an online format beginning the week of July 27th through the week of August 17th. What we're looking at doing is making topical weeks. For instance, the first week would be academic based. And a series of videos would come out on the Monday of each week related to the topic. And then also that week, your student would register for a meeting with an orientation leader, and we'd have like orientation leader teams just like we do in person, but they would be doing Zoom calls with all of the first year students in smaller groups to answer any questions they may have related to the videos that we were showing, as well as to go over some other information and give them some resources as well for that week. So we're looking at doing that spread over a month. The information, will be sent out to all first year students this week. So encourage them to check the mail as we will be sending out the information of how to register, as well as tomorrow morning, I believe, they will be getting an email to their Worcester State email talking about the first year orientation program that will be moving online, as well as our online social media type Google site program that's happening starting June 15th, which is New Lancer Connect. So all of that information will actually be in the email tomorrow, so have them check their email for all of that. What's most important to know is we're taking really a lot of the curriculum that is in our in-person program and moving it to an online format, but I feel the most important thing about our orientation program is the peer-to-peer connection. So what's super important is that we still keep the connections they make with first year students that are coming in with them, as well as the upperclassmen through the orientation leader meeting. So please know that that's super important to me and my staff. So we are trying to replicate that as best we can online. It's going to be a little different, but we will have, the program will be very similar to all the components of our in-person, just in a different way. So please have them kind of take a look at that when they do receive it and have them register. Registration is open until July 17th. Okay. Any more questions at all, Josh? Anything come up?